You'll never touch a single cent, Elena continued. I'll use your money to raise your children properly, educate them well, and teach them to become decent men, the exact opposite of you. When you get out, you'll be penniless, Mateo. Good luck.
New York City, 5:30 a.m. The urban lights of Manhattan had not fully gone dark yet, casting their glow onto the glass walls of a 45th floor penthouse worth $3 million, located right in the heart of Tribeca. Inside, the temperature was permanently maintained at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius, cool and still, silent like a freshly printed banknote. Mateo Cruz, 40 years old, stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the Windsor knot of his custom-tailored Tom Ford suit. He possessed the textbook appearance of a top-tier commercial real estate broker, slicked-back glossy hair, a blindingly white manufactured smile, and the confident demeanor of a man who had never tasted defeat. "How long is this Chicago trip?" a voice called out from the marble kitchen island. That was Elena, his legal wife in New York. At 38, Elena was a powerful CFO, chief financial officer, of a technology conglomerate. She did not lift her eyes from the iPad displaying stock charts, one hand holding a cup of strong espresso. "About 10 days, sweetheart. The Midwest market is heating up and I need to close that industrial land deal," Mateo replied in flawless American English without the slightest trace of an accent, leaning down to place a light kiss on her cheek. A dry kiss, procedural rather than affectionate. "All right, remember to wire the yacht maintenance fee before Friday. Don't embarrass me in front of the marina management," Elena said coolly. They were the perfect definition of a New York power couple. No children, financially independent, and treating marriage like a profitable corporate merger. Mateo stepped out the door, his private elevator carrying him straight down to the parking garage, where a waiting Uber Black would take him to LaGuardia Airport. But Mateo did not fly to Chicago. San Antonio, Texas, 6 p.m. the same day. The hot, humid air characteristic of the American South slammed into Mateo's face the moment he stepped through the airport's glass doors. He had swapped his expensive suit for a pair of frayed Levi's jeans, a simple polo shirt, and a baseball cap. He drove a rented Ford F-150 pickup truck from the parking lot, cruising smoothly down the highway toward a quiet suburban neighborhood. Here, he was not Mateo Cruz, the real estate shark, but Matt Cruz, the husband who works far from home. The truck stopped in front of a single-story ranch-style house spanning 2,800 square feet, approximately 260 square meters, surrounded by a lush green lawn and rows of old oak trees. A small wooden crucifix was hung respectfully beside the front door. "Dad's home!" 2 children, a boy and a girl, burst out of the front door and wrapped their arms around his legs. Following them was Sophia, 30 years old, his second wife. She wore light blue nursing scrubs, her gentle face free of heavy makeup like Elena's, yet radiating the warmth of a devoted mother. "Welcome home, Matt. May God bless your trip and keep you safe," Sophia smiled, taking his travel bag from his hands. Mateo embraced Sophia, breathing in the scent of cheap but pleasant fabric softener, so different from the overpowering Chanel perfume Elena wore. In Texas, he played the role of a model husband, devout, hard-working on offshore oil rigs, according to the lie he told Sophia, returning home only once every 2 weeks to bring his paycheck to support his family. That night, behind the closed door of his home office, Mateo opened a small safe hidden behind a painting of Jesus Christ. He pulled out 2 Social Security cards. One bore the name Mateo Cruz. The other bore the name Matt Cruz. 20 years earlier, a careless administrative clerk at the immigration office had accidentally issued him 2 identical identification numbers due to a typing error in his name. Instead of reporting it for correction, Mateo had kept silent.
He realized it was a gift from God, or more accurately, a crack opened by the devil. He had used these two legitimate identities to build two parallel lives, marrying two women in two different states, successfully deceiving both the IRS and the judicial system for over a decade. He thought he was a genius. He thought he was in control of everything. He reveled in Elena's polished affection in New York and Sophia's reverent devotion in Texas. Mateo closed the safe, curling his lips into a victorious smirk, completely unaware that this was the last time he would enjoy this fabricated peace. A sudden hailstorm poured down onto the asphalt of Interstate 40 as it cut through Tennessee, reducing visibility to nearly zero. Mateo Cruz was behind the wheel of a rented Chevrolet Malibu, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the steering wheel to the sound of jazz music. He was carrying out his familiar identity transition routine, driving from Texas north to a transit airport in Nashville before flying back to New York in order to erase any direct travel trace between the two cities. But his meticulously maintained plan of 15 years was about to be destroyed by something beyond his control. An 18-wheeler ahead lost traction, hydroplaned, and spun sideways, blocking the entire road. Screech! Crash! The shrill sound of brakes was swallowed by a horrific clash of metal. Mateo's car failed to slow in time and slammed straight into the rear of the truck at 70 miles per hour. The airbags exploded, smashing into his face. Mateo's world went dark instantly. 15 minutes later, the wail of police and ambulance sirens echoed across the area. State Trooper Davis braved the rain and approached the mangled vehicle. Seeing the victim unconscious and bleeding from the head, Davis quickly searched the man's wallet to establish identity for the EMTs. Davis opened the expensive leather wallet. In the first compartment, he pulled out a New York State driver's license, Mateo Cruz, address in Tribeca, Manhattan. Following standard procedure, he flipped to the secondary pocket and froze. Another driver's license, this one issued by the state of Texas, Matt Cruz, address in San Antonio. Under the flashlight beam streaked with rainwater, Davis compared the two cards. The same face, same height, eye color, but two different names and two different ID numbers. "That's strange," Davis muttered, then ran back to his patrol car. He entered the information from both licenses into the laptop mounted in the vehicle. The federal database had just been updated and synchronized under the new Real ID Act. The laptop screen flickered for a few seconds, then a bright red alert appeared on the screen, the capitalized text burning into the officer's eyes. Identity fraud suspected. SSN mismatch. A routine traffic accident had officially transformed into the scene of a federal investigation. Mateo lay unconscious amid the wreckage, completely unaware that his perfect facade had just been ripped apart by a computer algorithm. 2:15 a.m. in New York. In the silent master bedroom of the penthouse, the shrill ring of a phone shattered the night. Elena reached toward the nightstand, her eyes still closed, but the mind of a CFO had already switched into full alert mode. She glanced at the screen, an unfamiliar number with a 615 area code, Tennessee. "Hello, this is Elena," she answered, her voice hoarse but firm, devoid of sleepiness. On the other end was an urgent voice mixed with hospital noise. "Ma'am, this is Officer Davis with the Tennessee Highway Patrol. I'm calling from Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Are you a family member of Mr. Matt Cruz?" Elena frowned and sat upright, the silk blanket slipping from her shoulders. "I'm sorry, who did you just say?" "Mr. Matt Cruz, ma'am, the victim of a serious car accident on I-40. The officer patiently repeated, flipping through a blood-stained notebook. The victim's phone screen had been shattered. Davis had only managed to dial the number labeled emergency that flickered briefly before the device powered off. A moment of silence engulfed the luxurious bedroom. Elena took a deep breath, her brain beginning to process data at lightning speed. "Officer, I believe there's been a mistake," Elena said, her tone icy. "My husband's name is Mateo Cruz, and he is currently on a business trip in Chicago, over 500 miles north of Tennessee. Are you certain about the victim's identity?" The officer hesitated slightly, confused, glancing down at the file in his hands. He had just cross-checked the data from the Texas driver's license found in the victim's wallet. "Ma'am, the identification clearly states Matt Cruz, resident of San Antonio, Texas. We found your number listed as his emergency contact." Matt Cruz, San Antonio, Texas? Those three key words struck Elena's confidence like three hammer blows. She had never heard her husband mention the name Matt or any connection to Texas, but a woman's intuition, combined with the razor-sharp instincts of a financial executive trained to hunt fraudulent numbers, told her this was not a scam call. "What's his condition?" Elena asked, her tone shifting from defensive to probing. "Traumatic brain injury, fractured ribs, currently in a deep coma. We need a family member to come immediately to sign surgical consent forms." "I'll consider it," Elena said curtly and hung up. She did not cry, nor did she panic and immediately book a flight. Instead, she got out of bed, walked straight into her office, and opened her MacBook Pro. The glow of the screen illuminated her cold, expressionless face. She did not search for flights to Tennessee. She logged into the online banking system and began tracing the money flow of the husband who was supposedly in Chicago. 48 hours had passed since the fateful phone call. At Vanderbilt Hospital in Tennessee, Mateo still lay motionless in the intensive care unit, ICU, surrounded by breathing tubes and machines, completely cut off from the outside world. But in New York, Elena had not set foot on a plane to be by her husband's side. Instead, she turned the home office of the penthouse into a miniature forensic accounting command center. As a seasoned CFO, Elena understood one fundamental truth: people can lie, but numbers never do. She logged into the asset management portals of Fidelity and Vanguard using the admin access that Mateo, out of sheer arrogance, had never imagined she would actually use to examine the details of their long-term investment portfolios. Elena's sharp eyes moved swiftly across the retina display, filtering data in real time. She detected subtle irregularities in their joint 401k retirement fund. Over the past 3 years, Mateo had executed dozens of early withdrawals, willingly accepting the IRS's 10% penalty tax. The amounts were not large enough to trigger immediate alarms, $15,000, $20,000, then $9,000, but they occurred with mechanical regularity. The total sum siphoned off reached $500,000. "Where did you take this money, Mateo?" Elena muttered, her fingers striking the keyboard forcefully as she traced the wire trail. All the funds flowed into a corporate account with an intentionally generic-sounding name, Alamo Consulting, LLC. Elena looked up the company's employer identification number in the Federal Business Database. The result made a chill run down her spine. Alamo Consulting, LLC was not a real estate consulting firm. It was a shell company registered in the state of Texas. And its registered business address? 124 Oakwood Drive, San Antonio, Texas, 78209. It matched exactly the address on the Texas driver's license of Matt Cruz that the police officer had read to her. The final piece clicked into place. There had never been a Chicago business trip. There had never been a promising industrial park project. $500,000 of her hard-earned money had been funneled to Texas to sustain another life. Elena did not shed a single tear, her face hardening into something terrifyingly resolute.
To her now, Mateo was no longer the man who shared her bed. He was a bad debt, one that needed to be processed and liquidated immediately. The private investigator's report landed in Elena's email inbox just 4 hours later. Attached were long-distance surveillance photos, a peaceful suburban home with a white picket fence, a front yard swing, and a small pink children's bicycle leaning against the side of the house. The address of the shell company that had devoured $500,000 of her money was, in reality, a happy family home. Elena did not make a phone call to confront anyone. She booked the earliest flight to San Antonio. She packed no luggage, carrying only a black Hermes Birkin bag filled with bank records and legal documents. 8 p.m. in Texas. Night had fallen over Oakwood Drive, the neighborhood quiet except for the chirping of crickets and the warm yellow light spilling from windows. A glossy black Uber pulled up in front of house number 124. Elena stepped out. Against the rustic suburban backdrop, she looked almost alien, her sharp black suit and needlepoint heels clicking rhythmically on the paved walkway. She stood at the door and took a deep breath, not to calm herself, but to lock away every trace of vulnerable emotion. She pressed the doorbell. The oak door opened. Standing before Elena was Sophia, nearly 10 years younger, barefaced, her hair hastily tied back. In her arms, she held a sleepy 2-year-old boy rubbing his eyes. The scene radiated a heartbreaking sense of peace, utterly at odds with the storm raging inside Elena. "Hello, how can I help you?" Sophia asked, a friendly smile on her lips, assuming this was a salesperson or a lost visitor. Elena did not smile. She removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes as cold as a scalpel. She said something very quietly, just loud enough for the two of them to hear. The smile vanished from Sophia's face. Her expression shifted from confusion to absolute horror. Her eyes widened, staring at the elegant stranger before her. Thud. Sophia collapsed to her knees. She clutched her child tightly to her chest, as if shielding him from an invisible threat. Tears poured down her face, her mouth trembling, unable to form words. Her entire body shook violently, as though she had just received a death sentence. Elena showed no mercy. She coldly stepped past the shattered Sophia on the floor and walked straight into the neat living room of the house. The front door slammed shut before the audience's eyes. Inside that house, Mateo's fate was being decided, but in a way no one could have anticipated. 10 days after the accident, Mateo was finally cleared for discharge by doctors at Vanderbilt University Medical Center, though the bruises across his chest and his persistent limp remained. The first thing he did was not call his wife, but book the earliest Delta Airlines flight back to New York. In his mind, Mateo had already prepared a flawless script. He would tell Elena that he had been robbed and beaten in Chicago, losing all his documents and his phone, which explained the lack of contact. He believed that with his smooth talking and a touch of injured vulnerability, Elena would soften and forgive him yet again. As for the duplicate documents discovered in Tennessee, he would hire a local lawyer to smooth it over later. JFK International Airport, Terminal 4, a busy afternoon. Mateo dragged his small suitcase, limping toward the exit, his eyes glued to his phone screen as he checked stock prices. Just as he passed through the domestic security doors, 2 tall men in neatly tailored gray suits stepped forward and blocked his path. They did not look like airport security. They radiated the cold authority of the federal government. "Mr. Mateo Cruz?" the man on the left asked, his tone not a question but a confirmation. "That's me? Who are you? I'm in a hurry." Mateo frowned, attempting to sidestep them. The man on the right raised a gold badge attached to his leather wallet, engraved clearly with 3 letters, FBI.
I'm Special Agent Miller. You are under arrest pursuant to a warrant issued by the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York on charges of federal identity fraud and large-scale tax evasion through the unlawful use of multiple Social Security numbers. Mateo froze. The phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the marble floor. Before he could react, his arms were twisted behind his back. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed coldly. "You've got it wrong. This is just an administrative error. Call my lawyer," Mateo shouted as he was escorted away through the murmuring crowd, phones raised to record. 2 hours later, at an FBI holding facility in Manhattan, sitting across from his personal attorney, a man named Harvey, known for defending white-collar criminals, Mateo gradually regained his composure. The initial panic faded, replaced by the familiar arrogance of a wealthy man. "Listen, Harvey, this is just paperwork," Mateo sneered, rubbing his reddened wrists. "Post bail for me immediately, $500,000 or $1 million, whatever it takes. I'll go home, shower, talk to Elena, and by tomorrow morning we'll turn this into a civil matter." Mateo leaned back in his chair with confidence. He was convinced that Elena, the wife who always prioritized appearances, would use money to silence the public and get him out. He had no idea that his powerful wife in New York and his devoted wife in Texas had already met, and that the real sentence awaiting him would not be handed down in a courtroom, but in the hands of those two women. Less than 24 hours after Mateo was handcuffed at JFK Terminal 4, the story of the two-faced man had moved far beyond dry legal briefs. It exploded into a cultural phenomenon, a real-life reality show that all of America was desperate to watch. The notoriously aggressive tabloid New York Post devoted its entire front page to a bold headline, "Love and Lies, the Tale of Two Cities," accompanied by a composite image of Mateo's handsome face split in two, one half fused with the glittering Manhattan skyline, the other with the quiet Texas suburbs. On social media platform X, Twitter, the hashtags The Double Life and Mateo is Over Party shot straight to the #1 global trending spot. 24-hour cable networks like CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC immediately jumped in, dissecting the case from every sociological angle. American media, driven by its instinct to dramatize everything, quickly constructed two perfectly opposing archetypes to attract viewers. Elena was branded the Wall Street Ice Queen. Paparazzi camped outside her building around the clock, lenses trained on the woman who appeared unfailingly in powerful black suits, her face cold and expressionless, stepping into luxury cars without answering a single question. The public both feared her success and wondered whether this woman of steel possessed a heart at all. Sophia was portrayed as the Texas saint. Interviews with her neighbors aired repeatedly, praising her as a devoted mother and a compassionate nurse who always helped her community. Images of her modest home with the American flag hanging out front in San Antonio became symbols of innocence betrayed. Public opinion was deeply divided, yet unified in its target. Online forums erupted into fierce debates. Some sympathized with Sophia, others admired Elena's resolve, but all agreed on one thing: branding Mateo public enemy #1. The pressure from this media storm bore down heavily on the office of the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. The case was no longer a simple tax fraud matter that could be quietly resolved through a plea deal. The public demanded a spectacle. An exemplary trial was scheduled, transforming the courtroom into the most dramatic stage in America. Detained at the infamous Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan, Mateo was forced to trade his Tom Ford suits for a faded orange jumpsuit. Yet even inside the cramped cell, the instincts of a top-tier broker surged back to life. He did not see his current situation as punishment, but as a difficult deal that simply needed to be renegotiated. Sitting across from Harvey, his personal attorney, separated by the glass partition in the visitation room, Mateo radiated a calm that was almost unsettling. He believed he understood the psychology of those two women completely, holding it firmly in the palm of his hand. "Don't worry, Harvey. This will never go to trial," Mateo smirked, sliding 2 sealed envelopes through the narrow slot. "Deliver these to them. These are the keys to getting me out of here." The first letter was addressed to Elena. There was no apology for love, no emotional appeal. Mateo wrote in the tone of a business partner. "Elena, you are the smartest woman I've ever met. You know very well that if I go to prison, your reputation on Wall Street will be stained and our joint assets will be frozen. Withdraw the lawsuit, testify on my behalf, we'll divorce amicably, and I'll compensate you financially. Don't let emotions ruin profits." He was certain that for Elena, money and reputation always came before love. The second letter was addressed to Sophia. The tone shifted 180 degrees, becoming desperate and drenched in religious sentiment. "Sophia, my love, God is testing our faith. I lost my way under the pressure of providing for our children, but my heart has always belonged to our family. Please forgive this sinful father. Don't let our children grow up knowing their father went to prison. God teaches us to be merciful, doesn't he?" He knew Sophia's weakness was her compassion and her blind devotion. "Are you sure about this, Mateo?" Harvey asked uneasily. "Public opinion is extremely hostile right now." "Absolutely sure," Mateo replied with confidence. "Elena loves money too much to send me to prison. Sophia loves the children too much to watch me suffer. I'm the center of their universe. They need me." Mateo leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, imagining himself soon released on bail, savoring a glass of wine and laughing at the legal system. He had no idea that these calculated letters would not save him. Instead, they would become ironclad evidence of his cruelty and psychological manipulation in the court of conscience of 2 awakened women. February in New York. The biting cold of -5 degrees Celsius enveloped lower Manhattan, turning Foley Square in front of the United States District Court, SDNY, into a massive freezer. Light snow drifted down, dusting the imposing granite steps with a pale white layer. But the cold weather could not dampen the searing heat of a case that had captured the attention of the entire nation. From 6 in the morning, hundreds of reporters from major news agencies, satellite broadcast trucks, and crowds of curious onlookers had flooded the area. Packed tightly behind police barricades, their breath turned into white vapor in the air as they waited for the appearance of the 3 main characters in this real-life drama. Exactly 9 a.m. An armored U.S. Marshals transport vehicle slowly pulled up to the curb. The doors opened. Mateo stepped out. Today, he was permitted to wear an expensive navy blue suit instead of prison attire to maintain his image before the jury, but his hands were still tightly cuffed in front of him. Camera shutters erupted like machine gun fire, flashes exploding nonstop, turning the scene as bright as daylight. Mateo lifted his chin and inhaled the freezing air. His eyes swept the crowd, searching for familiar faces, and he found them. On the left side of the steps stood Elena, like a monument of ice. She wore a $4,000 cream-colored Max Mara shearling coat, oversized black sunglasses covering half her face, a crocodile leather handbag in hand. She stood apart, radiating power and distance. On the right, about 10 meters away, was Sophia. She wore a simple black puffer coat, a wool scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. She stood more timidly, her eyes red-rimmed, yet her gaze was strangely resolute.
No one stood beside her. She looked small and utterly alone amid the chaos. Mateo curled his lips into a discreet half-smile. They came, he thought triumphantly. The presence of both women, standing apart, reinforced his blind belief that his divide-and-conquer strategy had worked. He believed Elena was there to protect assets and Sophia was there out of marital loyalty. He climbed the steps, preparing to perform the most convincing role of remorse of his life. The crowd suddenly fell silent. The air tightened like a drawn wire. The historic moment of confrontation began.
As Mateo was escorted closer to the main entrance, he deliberately slowed his pace, adopting a weary posture, his gaze fixed on Sophia. He saw her step out from the crowd and move quickly toward him. In a flash of delusion, Mateo thought she would rush into his arms, or at least collapse in tears, begging the officers. "Sophia, I know I was wrong," Mateo began, his voice low and carefully performed. Smack! The sharp sound of flesh striking flesh rang out clearly in the stunned silence, captured perfectly by dozens of directional microphones from the television networks. The slap, loaded with all the suppressed fury and pain of the Southern wife, snapped Mateo's head to the side, leaving 5 red fingerprints blazing across his cheek. "Sin vergüenza! You shameless bastard!" Sophia screamed, her voice breaking with rage, mixing English with Spanish. "You are a disgrace to our family. You don't deserve to be the father of my children." The 2 U.S. Marshals jolted, about to intervene, when Elena appeared like a commanding specter. She approached at an unhurried pace, the sound of her heels striking the cold stone with chilling authority. In her right hand was a steaming venti-sized Starbucks coffee. Mateo looked at Elena with a pleading gaze, hoping her rationality would salvage the situation. "Elena, please don't make a scene." His reply was a stream of scorching brown liquid hurled straight onto his pristine white shirt and expensive suit. Mateo screamed in pain and shock, stumbling backward and tripping on the steps. As he struggled to regain his balance, Elena swung her left arm and slammed a thick folder into his chest. Papers burst free, fluttering down onto the filthy snow at his feet. "Divorce papers," Elena said, her voice calm and razor-sharp, loud enough for all of America to hear through the live broadcast. "And a civil subpoena for asset misappropriation. You're finished, Mateo." There was no melodramatic catfight over a man. In front of the cameras stood 2 women united in punishing a betrayer. The crowd erupted, gasps turning into jeers of approval aimed at the 2 wives. The image of Mateo standing hunched, soaked in coffee, one cheek swollen red, surrounded by legal documents swirling in the snowy wind, instantly became an iconic viral meme. He lowered his head, feeling for the first time in his life a bone-deep humiliation. 30 minutes after the chaos outside the courthouse, Mateo sat in a soundproof legal consultation room inside the federal building, the bitter smell of dried coffee still clinging to his damp suit. He was trembling from the cold and from rage, his hands clutching his head. Harvey entered, slammed the door shut, and placed a thick stack of documents on the cold metal table. The seasoned lawyer's face was grave. "This is very bad, Mateo," Harvey said quietly. "The IRS has just made its move. They will freeze all of your assets at 9 a.m. tomorrow. You'll lose everything, the penthouse, the stocks, the retirement funds. You'll walk out of prison as a homeless man buried in debt." Mateo shot up, panic flooding his eyes. "That's impossible. You have to do something, Harvey. What am I paying you for?" Harvey sighed, leaned forward, and whispered like a conspirator. "There is one way, a narrow loophole, but you have to decide right now."
He slid the folder toward Mateo. The title read clearly, Irrevocable Trust Agreement. Elena contacted me through her attorney. She says she hates you, but she doesn't want a prolonged case to damage her company's reputation. She's offering a deal. If you voluntarily transfer all liquid assets into a trust for Sophia's 2 children as compensation, Elena will withdraw the civil lawsuit and write a letter requesting leniency for you before the court. Mateo narrowed his eyes. Transfer it to Sophia's kids. Why? Because under federal law, assets placed in a child support trust are shielded from IRS seizure. You see, it's the only way to legally move the money before the tax auditors strike. On paper, it's for the children, but you can insert clauses to regain control after you're released. You keep the money, silence Elena, and win back Sophia. Mateo's eyes lit up. He sneered. He believed Elena, no matter how cold, feared scandal, and Sophia was far too naive to manage money. He would hide the funds under the children's names and reclaim them later. "Give me the pen," Mateo said decisively. He signed his name, Mateo Cruz, with a flamboyant flourish at the bottom of the dense legal document, not bothering to read the fine print. He believed he had just pulled off the greatest con of his life, using the law to outsmart the law itself. As the pen lifted from the paper, Mateo exhaled in relief, unaware that his signature had just sealed the door to his future more brutally than any prison cell ever could. The screen fades to black, then slowly lights up with white text. Flashback, 7 days before the court date. The scene rewinds to the cozy living room of the house in San Antonio at the moment Elena stepped into Sophia's home in Part B.4. Only now does the audience finally see what truly happened behind that closed door. There was no intimidation at all. Elena sat on the worn old sofa, facing Sophia, who was trembling slightly. On the coffee table, Elena did not place a lawsuit filing. Instead, she laid down another stack of private investigator photographs. "Do you really think he only has the 2 of us?" Elena asked, her voice lowered, no longer cold, but replaced by a merciless kind of pity. Sophia picked up the photos. In them, Mateo was seen with his arm wrapped around the waist of a very young blonde girl, about 22 years old, walking into a hotel in Chicago. "An intern," Elena said curtly. "He used money from my retirement fund and your savings to keep her. To Mateo, I'm an ATM and you're free childcare. He doesn't love anyone, Sophia. He's a parasite." Sophia's collapse was not caused by fear of Elena, but by the naked truth about the husband she had worshipped. She wiped away her tears, her eyes slowly shifting into the fury of a mother driven into a corner. "What should I do?" Sophia asked, her voice breaking. "In this country, justice is very expensive," Elena said, her eyes gleaming with resolve. "But I have money, and you have public sympathy. We're not going to fight over a worthless man. We're going to work together." Elena pulled out the plan. "I'll hire the best lawyers for you. We'll stage the courthouse confrontation to crash his company's stock and cost him his job. After that, I'll trap him into signing the trust. I need you to play the role of the wounded but resilient wife. Can you do that?" Sophia looked at the photo of her 2 children hanging on the wall, then met Elena's gaze head-on and nodded firmly. "For my children," she said, "I'll do anything." Cut back to the present, inside the courtroom. The judge struck the gavel, the sound echoing sharply to close the hearing. Defendant Mateo Cruz is hereby sentenced to 120 months of imprisonment, 10 years, for federal fraud, tax evasion, and money laundering, sentenced to be carried out immediately. Mateo received the verdict with a mask of false calm. He thought to himself,
10 years is fine. I'm still young. When I get out, I'll have millions waiting in the trust to rebuild my life." The U.S. Marshal stepped forward and pulled him to his feet. As he passed the front row, Mateo deliberately slowed, leaning close to Elena and whispering with a crooked smile, "Thanks for the trust fund advice, Elena. You still have some feelings after all. Take good care of my money." Elena stood up, adjusted the collar of her blazer, leaned in close to his ear, and whispered a single sentence, just loud enough to crush his soul. "Mateo, didn't you read Clause 14.3 of that agreement? The trust you signed is irrevocable. The sole beneficiaries are Sophia's 2 children, and the lifetime appointed trustee," she paused, "is me." The smile vanished from Mateo's face. The blood drained completely from his skin. "You'll never touch a single cent," Elena continued, her voice icy yet deeply satisfied. "I'll use your money to raise your children properly, educate them well, and teach them to become decent men, the exact opposite of you. When you get out, you'll be penniless, Mateo. Good luck." Mateo screamed and tried to lunge at Elena, but the marshal slammed him to the floor. "You evil woman! You tricked me! Harvey!" He howled in despair as he was dragged away, his screams echoing through the courthouse hallway before fading behind the heavy iron doors. 1 year later. Thanksgiving. A warm scene inside a house in Texas. The rich aroma of roasted turkey fills the air. 2 children laugh and run joyfully across the yard. In the kitchen, Sophia is seasoning a pot of pumpkin soup. She looks radiant, full of life, no longer worn down as she once was. The doorbell rings. Sophia hurries to open the door. Elena stands there, no longer in her rigid black suit. She wears a soft beige knit dress, holding a bottle of wine and toys for the children. "Hello, partner." Elena smiles, a rare, genuine smile. "Welcome home, Elena," Sophia says, opening her arms and embracing the woman who was once her rival, now her benefactor and most trusted ally. They do not become sentimental sisters. They are 2 independent women who respect each other, raising children from the ashes of the past. Cut 2. Federal Prison, Fort Dix, New Jersey. Snow falls heavily outside. Mateo sits curled up in a cold, narrow cell. On the TV in the common area, a special program airs about the most inspiring women of the year. He sees Elena and Sophia sitting side by side on Oprah Winfrey's sofa, celebrated nationwide as symbols of unity and female empowerment. Mateo closes his eyes. A single belated tear slides down his cheek. He once had everything. Now he has nothing.